You want to know what the biggest nightmare for me is, Heat fans? It's not getting chased by a bear or chased by a snake. It's not even if the Miami Heat drafted Zach Edey. Hey. It would be this.
You just run it back without doing anything. I think about that.
12 seconds later.
The Van Gundy podcast. As we approach the 5-minute mark, look at Hauser. He's feeling free.
So I want you guys to keep all of that in mind. Remember how bad running it back is. Remember how much I hate that when I show you this trade by my guy on Twitter at Big Heat Energy. He clearly put a lot of thought and effort into this. So make sure y'all go follow my boy. His link will be in the description. Now, he has the Miami Heat getting Mikal Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Dennis Schroeder in exchange for Tyler Hero. I know we gonna miss the boy, Duncan Robinson, and my guy, Jaquez Jr. Now, I'm sure that your guys' initial reaction will be very similar to mine, which is, why are we giving up so many assets, pretty much all of our assets, for a guy who's not a real whale, a guy who's not a true difference maker? Well, I would say, one, you're not getting rid of Nikola Jovic, so at the very least you get to keep him. But still, Hero, Duncan, for salary filler, 2 first-round picks, Jaime, that's a package that could maybe get you Donovan Mitchell, could definitely get you Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. Why would you settle for Mikal Bridges? Well, the truth is, as of right now... Whoa, stop the video. I see you ain't subscribed yet? That's crazy. Nah, but for real, go ahead and subscribe. Leave a like if you enjoy. Really got a dream to do this full time one day, and it helps your boy out a lot. Thank you. Donovan Mitchell is not available. DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, those guys aren't officially available. Now, I know the NBA season's still going on, and a lot more will come out in a month, about a month, when Mitchell's finally able to sign that extension. But let's even say he's eligible to sign that extension, right? Donovan Mitchell, right? And he doesn't. Well, now you know he's available. What happens if that drags out all summer? Just like what would happen, just like Damian Lillard last year. So the Heat waited all offseason, didn't make no moves, didn't get Damian Lillard, screwed themselves over. They were an 8 seed and got their ass kicked in the first round. So it comes to a certain extent. How long do you wait for a guy? And again, that's assuming that any of these guys become available. Because if they don't become available, then I certainly would put a lot of consideration into this trade, because the last thing you want to do as a Heat fan is run it back. That is the absolute worst case scenario. And in this trade, I will argue that the Heat get better. Maybe it's marginal. Maybe it's a lot more than that. I'm going to get into it later in this video. But you got to understand, Heat fans, you have to give to get. And yes, you might not think Mikal Bridges is worth it, but what's the alternative if a true whale is not available? And if a whale is available, serious question, let me know down below. How long are you willing to wait? Because last year with Dame, I was willing to ride it out to the end. Now, partly because Dame was so strong and saying, Miami, 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 I really thought he was going to come here. But that proved to be the wrong decision. And ever since that time, I said, I'm done waiting around for a guy. Now, a lot of people would argue whether Donovan Mitchell's even worth it. I personally think he kind of is worth it, but that doesn't mean I'd wait around for him, especially if they can get a deal like this, where I do think that the Heat get better. Now, you're really trading 3 offensive-minded guys for 3 kind of defensive-minded players. Now, obviously, they could all score a little bit, and the offense is inconsistent, but you really are losing a ton of shooting here as well. But initially, my ideal offseason for the Miami Heat would have been to lean into offense heavily. That's kind of not exactly what this trade is. But the main reason I kind of had that mindset is because I was tired of scoring under 90 points in the year 2024. They literally ended the season, last 3 playoff games, under 90 points. You know how ridiculous that is in this current year of this current NBA? It should never happen. So I was tired of not being able to score the ball. Obviously, the Heat had a lot of injuries, but they're always injured. So I'm done bringing up that excuse, right? But as much as I'm tired of that, I'm also tired of guys getting absolutely hunted on defense. And we saw that all the time with Tyler Hero. We saw that a lot with Duncan Robinson, although I do think he was better last year. And obviously, Jaquez was a rookie. I felt like he was fine defensively, but he's still more known as an offensive threat. So that being said, getting 3 defensive-minded guys that pretty versatile defenders in these three, that's something that I would actually be kind of cool with. So if you also look at this trade, you could have a starting lineup of this: Terry Rozier, Mikal Bridges, Jimmy Butler, Nikola Jovic, and Bam Adebayo. You still have 4 20-point-per-game scorers and Nikola Jovic, who we know is a very versatile offensive player, whether he's facilitating, whether he's spotting up without the ball, whether he has the ball in his hands in transition. So as much offense as you're losing with Tyler and Duncan, I still think you could put together a very, very great offensive lineup with these guys. Now, obviously, I kind of mentioned it earlier. You're losing scoring, kinda, but you'd still have a decent amount of offense. It would just be different, because what you're really losing is that sort of dynamic shooting that Tyler and Duncan bring you. Because both those guys last year were right around 40% from three on very high volume. Now, Mikal Bridges, he's a pretty elite three-point shooter too. He's actually at almost 38% shooting from his career on 5 attempts per game, which is a very nice number with the volume there. And last season, with his first full season as the guy in Brooklyn, Mikal Bridges shot over 7 threes a game, and he was at 37%. So that's very nice volume there, and would still help keep the shooting in the starting lineup that you might be losing with Tyler or Duncan. Again, it's different. Mikal Bridges is not going to be flying off screens. He's not going to be doing DHOs with Bam. Maybe, who knows? We haven't seen Mikal in this Heat system, but he's obviously not quite the movement shooter that those other two guys, particularly Duncan Robinson, is now. As far as Schroeder, Dorian Finney-Smith, their shooting is a little bit more inconsistent. I mean, last season, Schroeder was pretty much a bucket once he got to Brooklyn. He was at 15 points per game, 41% from three, and that was on 5 attempts. But he's only 34% field goal percentage from three for his career. So obviously he's not a guy that you love when he's taking a ton of threes, but I suppose he's shown the ability to be a guy that can knock him down, particularly when we saw him most recently. Dorian Finney-Smith, a little bit more inconsistent, 35% on 5 attempts last year, which is right around his career average, that 35%. But just a couple years prior to that, he had back-to-back seasons at almost 40% from three. So a little bit inconsistent from three, but if he can get back to that 40%, especially since he was an elite corner three-point shooter, we know how much a corner three-point shooter could really open up this Heat offense. We saw that with PJ Tucker back in the day. It was like 2 years ago, but we know how critical that was to the Heat spacing for Jimmy and Bam. Their driving kick game, just having a knockdown guy in the corner is great. And if he can't get back to that 40%, he's still 35%. Even Dennis Schroeder was still a guy in the mid to low 30s. So they're still capable. I wouldn't say that they're negative spacers. Now, as far as you wouldn't have the shooting, I get that, but you would still have arguably 11 deep players that's all pretty versatile. And you give Spo guys that can be, that you give Spo a bunch of tools, he'll find a way to get the best use out of it. I mean, in theory, the depth chart could be something like Rozier and Schroeder at the 2, maybe Bridges and DeLon Wright. You'd have Butler and this hypothetical free agent. He has Gordon Hayward. You got Nikola Jovic, Dorian Finney-Smith, Kevin Love. So arguably 3 deep at the power forward position. And then you would also have Bam Adebayo and Andre Drummond. That's arguably 11 deep of guys that could all kind of do different things. So yeah, Spo would really have any form of lineup he would need based on the matchup of the opponent that night. Now, speaking a little bit more about the hypothetical signings that Big Heat Energy has in this trade, he has Gordon Hayward, a guy that I still personally really like. He's at 10 points per game last season between Charlotte and OKC. Obviously, his role dropped a lot with OKC, but still the numbers are decent. He was at 46% field goal, 41% from three. So obviously he can still shoot, and he's always been a guy that could pass a little bit, rebound a little bit, and defend a little bit. Obviously not quite the defender he used to be, but he did just turn 34 in March. So he's on the wrong side of 30, but still not super old. He's not like the last year's of Kyle Lowry here. So I still believe that Gordon Hayward is a guy that contributes. Now, Andre Drummond, he's personally a guy that I don't like as much. People look at his numbers and say, wow, why isn't he on a team? I say that executives know more than us, and there is a reason that Drummond has been on 6 teams in the last 4 seasons. Defensively, I think he's a bit inconsistent. He's always been a guy that can get you about a block and a steal a game. So he's slightly more mobile, which I do like, especially in this Heat system. but still just too inconsistent defensively for me. He's still a 0 on offense, which I don't think you can have in today's NBA. But at the end of the day, he's still an elite rebounder. Only played about 17 minutes a night last year with Chicago, but got you 9 boards a game. And the Heat are one of the worst rebounding teams in the entire league. So at the very least, Drummond provides a skill set that you know you need. And he's 6'11", 280. So he is substantially bigger than the couple of backup bigs we had last year. I mean, Thomas Bryant was like 6'10", 250. So Drummond's got about 30 pounds on him. And even Orlando Robinson was 7 foot, but he only weighed in at 235. So at 280, Drummond has a lot more size on both of those guys. And at the very least, I do think the Heat need someone who is big for the sake of being big, just to have a body to throw out there on a Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic if they need to. So if you're going to get a guy just to be big, why not get a guy who's even bigger than the bums you've been dealing with, even outside of Thomas Bryant and Orlando, who I kind of like those two guys. Let me not put them in the same category as the Cody Zellers and Dwayne Dedmons, but you get the point. Drummond is, I guess, better than a lot of those guys. So now let's talk about who the Heat are losing. Now, you'd obviously be losing Tyler Hero in this trade, a guy that has been one of the most polarizing players in Heat history, really. I myself am a fan, but I have never been shy of being critical of him. I've always said his ceiling is a high-level role player, and I don't like his fit in the starting lineup, especially now that you got Terry Rozier. And for a guy in Tyler Hero that's still getting paid a lot of money for another 3 seasons, you can't contribute that kind of money to a guy who's you have questions on his fit with the guy you just acquired, with a guy that you gave up a first-round pick for in Terry Rozier. You can't do that. So I understand you're losing Tyler Hero, but I think the guys you're bringing in just fit better. And I do think Tyler's still a decent player. So, I think he has some value there. You're also losing Duncan Robinson, a guy who had a major bounce back last season after being terrible the year prior. I know he had a good playoffs, but in that regular season, he was getting DNP coaches' decisions. Looked like one of the worst contracts in sports because you had him locked up for like another 4 years on big money, almost 18 to 19 million a year. But after his season last year, Duncan certainly had a huge bounce back. I think brought back a lot of his value. Although he was hurt in the postseason, I still think teams highly value his three-point shooting and what he brings to the table. Ideally, Duncan is a guy I'd like to keep on this team because seriously, the improvement he's shown last regular season was amazing. Coming off the dribble, doing floaters, even his passing off the pick and roll and pick and lob to Bam and finding guys back door like Jimmy. He was such an incredible player last year and really one of the Heat's best offensive players. And I do think his contract is a little bit better now that he's improved his game. So he's a guy I kind of would like to see, but at least the pieces you're bringing back are still guys that can sort of contribute. And obviously you're losing Jaime Jaquez Jr., the guy I say I got the foot fetish for the footwork. Y'all know I love my boy because at 23 years old, to show the kind of skill that he has is truly, truly incredible. And he has the physical tools to become an elite defender as well. I personally am super high on Jaime Jaquez's ceiling. But I'm going to say the same thing that I've been saying for a couple years now. Stop trying to half-ass a rebuild / championship contending. I don't think you can bridge 2 timelines and say, let's try to win now, but let's also keep Jaime Jaquez and Nikola Jovic to try to win in the future. You can't do that. You got to pick a direction and go all in. So while I think Jaime Jaquez will be a great player one day, he's a pretty decent player now, but he's still a few years away from reaching his true potential. Now, more so Nikola Jovic than Jaime Jaquez. So, because Jovic is obviously younger, you could argue if you're the Heat, maybe you would rather throw in, Nikola instead of Jaime. But the Heat are still desperately looking for that starting 4. You could argue Dorian Finney-Smith could play that role, but I do think at Nikola Jovic's size, it would just be a little bit better because he is 6'10" compared to Finney-Smith, who's like 6'7". And I am tired of the Heat with these small ball lineups. So now, if you put this starting lineup with Nikola Jovic, man, Mikal Bridges got like a 7'1" wingspan. You would have some true length in that starting lineup. You could finally say maybe this Heat team is big. And that's not something you've been able to say about them for a long time. But back to a couple of the other guys you'd be losing. You'd also be losing Caleb Martin and Hayward Highsmith. You would kind of be outpriced in free agency from both of those guys. Caleb, I think we expect to lose regardless because he has a player option. He'll opt out. Didn't have a great playoffs outside of that game 2. But I do think that he has shown enough, as far as being a really great two-way player in this league to sort of command some value for a team that's looking to win, especially since Caleb Martin has, real playoff NBA Finals experience. I think both contenders will be looking to add him as sort of that final piece. Maybe there could be some sort of sign and trade, whether he get an asset back, or you could have a young team that is looking to get there, that wants to sign Caleb Martin because he does have some of that experience. So maybe a team like Sacramento or OKC, one of those teams with some cap space. I love Caleb, but I don't want to overpay him. Hayward Highsmith, same deal. I do think he'll obviously be a little bit cheaper, and if the Heat can afford to keep him, I certainly would, but I don't think I'd go over $6 to $7 million a year. And they're saying Hayward might command up to 10 in the open market. So as much as I think he fits here because he was starting to be a pretty elite 3-and-D player, something that all teams need, and he did have that corner 3 as well that I was just talking about with Finney Smith, I don't want to overpay for these guys because I think the Heat have been overpaying guys for a long time, and that sort of puts them in this salary cap hell that we're seeing right now. So all of this factual information being said, I think I'd personally do the trade, which is different than my initial reaction. At first I saw this, I said, I like the idea of getting, marginally better, but it's too much assets to just do, just to get a little better. But the more I thought about it, and as I started taking my notes for this video, I think the Heat get better than a little bit marginal, right? That starting lineup, all 5 of those guys, Terry, Mikal, Jimmy, Jovic, and Bam, they could all play on and off the ball. With the exception of, I guess, Terry, you kind of prefer to keep him on ball, but that's why he would be the point guard, as opposed to starting him and Tyler when both of them kind of need the ball. But we've seen Mikal play off ball. We know Jimmy can play off ball. He likes the cut back door. He has no problem deferring to his other teammates. His 3-point shot's improving, and so is Bam's. So that even helps the off-ball case of most of those guys. We know Nikola Jovic played off-ball almost all of last year before they finally started running him at point guard a little bit. You just have a very versatile offense, especially in that starting lineup. Defensively, don't even get me started. Think about the clamps. And Terry Rozier, I loved his on-ball pressure last year. He was tenacious. Mikal Bridges, we talked about the 7'1" wingspan. We know he's elite on that side. Jimmy and Bam, they'd have 3 of the best defenders in the entire NBA between those 3. And Nikola Jovic at 6'10" also has shown to be very versatile, slides his feet very well, and improved dramatically from the start of last season to the end of it. So imagine how much better he's going to be on that end of the ball as well. Then off the bench, Dennis Schroeder, he's proven to be a tenacious point of attack defender. So what you're losing in Caleb, you're sort of getting in him in there as well. Finney Smith, we talked about a switchy 4 defender. This team would just be so versatile, so deep, and they would have a true identity now. They would be just a defensive gauntlet, making teams, work every possession, grind it out, which in a postseason series, that is going to be killer to the other team. Not to mention that you'd be losing Tyler Hero, who we know has not been healthy for a very long time now, at least not consistently. And you compare that to a guy like Mikal Bridges, who is the definition of an Iron Man. Last season played 82 games. The year before that, 83 games for Mikal. The year before that, 82 games, then 72, then 73, then 82 for Mikal. He is a guy that you can actually rely on, which is in stark contrast to Tyler Hero. So for that reason alone, I think he is a way more valuable asset to your team than Tyler Hero would be. So I do think the Heat actually get relatively substantially better with this deal. And compared to how the rest of the Eastern Conference is going to look, you don't at least to the current Eastern Conference, because we don't know what moves they're going to make, but you don't think this Heat team could be better than the Cavs, better than Philly, better than even Milwaukee, better than Indiana, who's in the conference finals now? I certainly think the Heat would be way better than all of those teams and could give Boston a run for the money because they would have the defense and the size to match up with those guys, and they'd have a lot more depth than them as well. Now, all that being said, how realistic is this trade? Well, One, we don't even know if Mikal Bridges is available, so I would say not super high based off that aspect. Now, if Mikal was available, we do know that the Nets initially rejected 4 first-round picks from Mikal. That was earlier this year. So would they accept Tyler and Jaime and 2 picks when earlier they rejected 4? Maybe. You could argue it's a better package. Tyler, we know, is proven. Jaime is certainly, came in like 3rd in all rookie team, right? Or I guess 4th in all rookie because of Chet Holmgren, but he was still the 3rd best player in that draft. So you could argue having 2 provens and 2 firsts is better than just 4 firsts. Schroeder is an expiring contract, so Nets would get some value for him. Finney Smith has a player option next year, which he could opt out of. So that would sort of be he's acting as an expiring deal too, that the Nets could get some assets for. And from the Heat perspective, I'd like to say the Heat wouldn't do it just because they didn't trade Tyler for KD or Spida or Dame. Why would they trade him for Mikal Bridges? But then part of me also thinks that, maybe the Heat did try to trade Tyler for those stars, but those teams just don't think Tyler's good enough to land you a whale. And in this case, I wouldn't say Mikal Bridges is a whale, so maybe a team is more likely to accept Tyler Hero. We did even hear Tyler linked to the Nets as the 3rd team when we were talking about all the Dame stuff last year. So, and also, I don't think the Heat care about picks. I don't think they'd want to lose Jaime Jaquez, but I do think they would prefer to keep Nikola Jovic. They seem to be very high on him. And obviously, Jimmy Butler loves Jovic. We know their relationship is close. So I think if the Heat had to pick, they would rather ship out Jaime. And as far as the free agents, Gordon Hayward wasn't happy in OKC. His role was very small. Only took 3 shots in the playoffs. I think played a total of 48 minutes for them. So he wasn't happy with his role. When he signed somewhere, he wants to have a bigger role. I think he'd have a role in Miami. But would he accept that for a minimum contract? I don't think so. I know Hayward's coming off a 4-year, $120 million contract. So maybe he looked at that as, hey, that was my last big deal. I'm okay playing for less money now to try to win a ring. Or maybe he's like, I'm not going from getting paid damn near max money to a minimum contract. I don't know. But I know Hayward wants a big role. That tells me that he probably wants to get paid like it's a bigger role too. So I don't think that's super likely. But I do think Andre Drummond would sign with the first team that gives him an offer just because he's bounced around for a reason. So all of that being said, I'll give the trade a 10% chance of happening just because I ultimately think if the Heat make a major move in sending out all these assets, I think Pat Riley just does it for a whale. They don't really seem to be in the market of, getting a bunch of really great pieces. Pat Riley is always the whale chase, and I think he's going to continue to do that. And ultimately, if they don't land a whale, it will harm the Heat. Now, if they do land a whale, if they get Donovan Mitchell, well, then it all worked out. But I do think that's the risk that Pat Riley is willing to take. Plus, I don't think the Nets make Mikal Bridges available just because last year was only his first full year in Brooklyn. They still have him for 2 more full seasons, next season, this season coming up, and the season after that. So I do think the Nets at least give it another season to see if they can build around Mikal Bridges since they traded a lot to get him. They sent out Kevin Durant. So I don't think I give the deal a 10% chance, but let me know what y'all think down below. I am going to stop talking because I've been doing this for 23 minutes. But make sure y'all subscribe because I'm on the grind to 5K by the start of next season. And I hope y'all enjoyed the draft series. I just had to. But anyways, I'll be reading all y'all comments. Peace.
Look, pull up in your city trying to get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.